you're starting to see this just really like this community being built around MCP. And it's really starting from places like this. Being in the room with people who are really building, like the builders in the AI space, it's just, it's a place to be.
Like, we are all helping each other to create like very cool stuff. Like, you can just go and talk to everyone. Everyone is just trying to create something like super cool, super useful for all.
I was jealous because people all the time would talk about, hey, the .com era, or then, like cloud and then mobile and so on. And now like we actually have a chance of building the next big thing.
Hi, I'm Matt DeBergalis, CTO and co-founder of Apollo GraphQL. Thanks for joining us today. If you're new to us, we're the company behind GraphQL. Developers have downloaded Apollo over 1 billion times to build their applications. And Apollo now orchestrates over 1 trillion API calls each month in companies of all sizes. We have a lot of new things to share today. We've got some new products and some ideas. We've got demos. Watson and Amanda are here with me to show you that. I think you're going to love it. But before we get into that, I just wanted to take stock of where we are. The last couple months have just been incredible. Agents are here now, and it's changing everything about how we build software, about the kind of software we can deliver to our users. It's going to change what an application even means. And this is happening so quickly. We all know it. It's faster than anything we've seen in our careers. It can feel bewildering and difficult to stay on top of. But some things don't change. GraphQL got its start in web and mobile development, and it shaped the stack we use to build modern applications. A lot of us use GraphQL to go beyond web and mobile, to blur the line between the two and to reach users on new platforms like voice and IoT. And now we have agents. And guess what? Agents call APIs too. It's what makes them agents. They call lots of APIs. And they need exactly what GraphQL has always delivered. So what I want to convey is that GraphQL is going to have just as big and important an impact on agents as it did on web and mobile development. And wherever you are in your AI development, GraphQL is going to give you a great foundation. Let's get into it. The key to agents is the Model Context Protocol. MCP is the emerging standard for how AI talks to the rest of the stack, how it can fetch data, call APIs, take actions. It's what makes AI into agents that can do stuff. And you can use MCP to build all kinds of intelligent experiences. A lot of you have been using it to build an intelligent DevOps workflow. Some of you are shipping customer experiences that are agentic. For example, a more hyper-personalized buying experience. Either way, the MCP tools that power these experiences are just like the APIs that sit underneath our web and mobile applications. They're examples of API orchestration workloads. And many of you have asked how we can build those workloads on top of the graph quickly and safely and securely. So we're really excited to share today the Apollo MCP server that lets you build agents quickly by exposing your APIs and your graph as high-quality MCP tools. And it's more than a server. It uses GraphOS to provide a complete end-to-end workflow for defining, deploying, managing, and securing your MCP tools. And tools that work at any scale, from POC all the way up through scaled production workloads. I want to ask Watson to show it to you here in a second. And what you'll see as he demos it is how helpful GraphQL is and what a good fit GraphQL and MCP are together. Take it away, Watson.
Thanks, Matt. So there are two emerging use cases for MCP: customer experiences and agentic DevOps workflows. First, we'll start with the customer experience. So let's say I'm a bank that wants to make an agentic customer experience that lets someone see their recent transactions for their accounts. I have my graph, and underneath it are some REST APIs, and all of that is visualized right here on the screen. We have a couple of entities like account, transaction, and cards. And we built the graph with connectors. And here's the schema that we're going to start with. Now, I want to write a tool that gets the recent transactions for a banking customer's accounts. Because this is Apollo, we can build that tool just by writing a query right in Explorer. Now, the MCP tool name and description are very important because they're used by the LLMs in selecting the right tool. Apollo MCP takes advantage of all the things we already have in GraphQL and makes it really simple to customize your tool annotations. So the operation name will be used as the MCP tool name. So I'll call that get customer account transactions. Any comments we write at the start of the operation will be used for the MCP tool description. Now we want to add in customer, and Explorer already adds the required variable for us because that's how it's defined in our schema. Apollo MCP will automatically make this customer ID input argument a required parameter for the MCP tool. And I love that it was verbose with customer ID. It's a much better choice than just ID to provide that extra context to the LLM. Now we simply need to define the data fields needed for our MCP tool. I'll pull in the accounts and the transactions for the name, description, amount, and status. We can test this operation to make sure it works. And now our operation is complete, and we're ready to make it available as an MCP tool. Now, you've always had collections in Studio, but now with MCP, your collection can become a set of tools. This means all you have to do is to define a new tool is just to write an operation and save it. We can also save variables to these tools to provide default values. Now, I don't want customer ID to be predefined, so I'll delete it and then save that operation. Now that we've saved that operation, we've made it available as a tool. Now let's open up Claude Desktop to see what the customer experience would look like. We can see the tool that we just created is right here. And then I can ask a question like, what recurring transactions do I have? Now, for a real agent, of course, the user session would carry that ID with it. But just for the demo, we'll type it in. All right. So under the hood, the model calls the tool, and that's just an operation. You can see the customer ID as the argument and the results from that operation. So the LLM doesn't know anything about our schema or even the operation shape, just the response it's getting from the operation executing. So with the information from the tool execution, the LLM can summarize it. Wait, that's kind of strange. I have all my subscriptions here, but they're all in pounds, and that doesn't seem right. The reason it returned the wrong currency is because we didn't include that in the context returned to the LLM. It's just declarative GraphQL, and all we have to do is just fix our query. So we can come back to Explorer, add in the currency symbol field, save that operation, and make it available for the tool. Now we can come back to Claude and ask that same question. All right, here's that extra context that's coming back. And we can see Claude is using the correct symbol now. That was really easy for me to fix. And this is great. The whole thing is really dynamic, and there's no SDLC. You can ship at the speed you write these tools. It's just a simple operation that you save, and Apollo MCP hot reloads, making that tool immediately available. Now I want to show you the other way to use Apollo MCP for the internal agentic development workflow. We're going to use GraphOS and MCP to do agentic development. I'm going to open up Cursor. Cursor is set up to point at Apollo MCP, and the platform GraphOS provides some additional tools for us. These additional tools simply let the LLM write operations for you, right from your local development environment. The next tool I wanted to create was to get the credit cards associated with the customer. So I can ask Cursor to do that for us. generate me an operation that's meant to be an MCP tool for getting the credit cards associated with a customer, and ask it to put a comment at the top along with testing it out. And the LLM is able to use those tools to start traversing our graph and understanding all the pieces needed to generate an operation for that. And then it can execute that operation to test it. And there we go. There's our generated operation. Now I can copy this and I can go back into Studio and follow the same DevOps flow we had. I'll paste in the operation and save it to my collection, which will make the tool available to me in my customer experience. Let's reopen Claude. And we can see that tool is now available to us. Now if I ask about my credit cards, Claude can now use that new tool. I'm so excited about developing MCP servers with Apollo because it's just so easy and the flexibility is exactly what I would expect. It all just works. And the best part, I don't have to worry about writing code or learning a new coding framework or any of that. All right, back to you, Matt.
That's MCP and Apollo. All the parts of the Apollo stack, including the new MCP server we're announcing today, are designed to work well together. You can deploy and operate the MCP component independently from the router, but the real power comes from the tight integration between all these pieces. So for example, you can define an MCP tool on top of any combination of REST APIs and GraphQL endpoints that you have. That's API orchestration with the router. You can take advantage of rate limiting and policy directives as part of your MCP tool definition. And you can manage the whole thing from Studio. That hot push where you don't have to deploy new code each time you want to change an MCP tool is such an important part of AI development because of the agility that it brings. And the whole thing rests on GraphQL. I said that earlier, the combination of GraphQL and MCP is so magical, and we have found that it's really a stellar combination. Let me give you a sense of what I'm talking about. As we've worked with many of you on building MCP tools, we've learned what works best. And here's some examples. MCP works best when you have single-purpose tools that have a narrow and clear focus. That means you're going to be building a lot of them. And that's GraphQL's wheelhouse. Each new tool that you want to build is just a query. That's the value of a declarative approach instead of having to write code. GraphQL is strongly typed and it's self-documenting. We take advantage of that. The more information we can provide a model about what an MCP tool is and does and how it's meant to be used, the better the results are. And so we take advantage even of comments that you put in your GraphQL schema to help that. We've also learned that the best way to keep the model on track and avoid hallucinations is to keep the context window as narrowly scoped as possible. Your underlying APIs may return a lot of data that doesn't help the model and only distracts it or causes it to go in the wrong direction. This has always been GraphQL's calling card, everything you need and nothing you don't in the query. For web and mobile development, we thought about that as a performance benefit, but with AI, it's a much more fundamental requirement that keeps everything tight and focused. And of course, at the end of the day, your tools have to be deterministic. We've learned that building free-form, dynamic experiences with AI works well when it sits on top of a firm foundation. So with Apollo, of course, every tool invocation does exactly the same thing every time. You don't want one customer to get back 5 recent transactions and the next one to get back 3. And so we rely on deterministic execution of the query to power the whole thing. It's a magical combination that we think works really, really well for MCP services. Okay, back to where we started. Web, mobile, IoT, voice, and now agents. The great thing about Graph is what you're building today works across all of them and sets you up for what you'll be building tomorrow. That's our vision. One language, one approach across all the touch points. And we're making ongoing investments in all of these clients. Apollo Client 4.0 is available now in preview. It adds support for modern Next.js, React Suspense, data masking, and reduces bundle sizes by 20%. Later this year, Apollo iOS 2 and Apollo Kotlin 5 are coming. In iOS, we're adding support for Swift 6 and async await, and we're adding a whole host of features to the increasingly popular Kotlin library for Java developers. 4 platforms, web, iOS, Kotlin, and of course MCP now. One vision, one language. Apollo is the layer that connects your clients to your APIs. So let's talk about that half of the stack. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to bring all the APIs that you need to the graph. A few months ago, we announced Apollo Connectors. Connectors is our take on a fully declarative approach to GraphQL. With connectors, there's no GraphQL server code, and you don't have to change your REST APIs. It's just GraphQL schema with a little bit of mapping configuration. Connectors dramatically simplifies schema design, it saves development time, and it improves performance because there's no extra hop in the network. We've gotten a lot of interest in connectors. We've also gotten a lot of your feedback, and we've been hard at work making connectors even better. Here's Amanda.
The release of Router 2.3 and Connect 0.2 introduces new capabilities. To explore these, I'll start with the same banking schema that you saw earlier and progressively enhance it by layering in some of my favorite new features. And at the end, we'll review all the new capabilities available to you starting today. The first feature I want to highlight is the ability to add entity connectors on type. So here you see an entity connector. This is on our query type, and this pattern's still valid. You can use it today, but we also have another option now that's going to be more concise and is recommended. If we scroll down here to our card type, we can define an entity connector directly on this type. To do so, you declare your connector down through the selection set. The only difference here is that you don't need to add that entity true like you do on the root query type. This is a much better pattern and will keep your query type clean and manageable. Now, scrolling up, I want to show you another feature I've been really enjoying. Here you can see that there's one query parameter on this URL. This is fine. This is a pattern we are all used to, and you can still use this as well, but it becomes really difficult to read and maintain when you have APIs with lots and lots of optional parameters to add here. So starting today, you can add your query parameters right below the base URL like this. This is a really clean and easy way to see and maintain at a glance all the arguments for your URL. Now, I've changed a few things, so let's go ahead and run this and check out our query. Let's build out a query on this customer here and make sure that we have our cards and the account transactions. And we're going to add a customer ID and pass in a parameter to filter those transactions. This returns as expected, which is great, but I want to take a look at how these calls are being executed to look for opportunities for improvement. You'll see that the cards attached to this customer each require a separate request that passes in the card ID individually each time. This is not ideal. This is a performance bottleneck, and it just gets worse as you scale. This is your classic N+1 scenario, and we've heard from many of you that being able to handle this in connectors is critical. So I'm really excited to show you next how to leverage batching in connectors. All right, so batching in connectors requires two things. First, you need a REST API that supports batching. And then to tell connectors to batch up these IDs, you need to use the batch variable. So our batching endpoint is a post that takes an array of IDs on the body And we want to remove this single ID argument. We're not going to need that anymore. We'll set the body to IDs and then that batch variable. Now, you may be thinking that you have batch APIs that don't work like this. They batch maybe in query parameters or some other pattern. That's fine. This will work with other batching patterns. This is just what this API requires. The key thing to remember is that you have your batch variable and a REST API that supports batching. Okay, let's run this so we can see it in action. If we execute this customer query again, we can see there is one single batched request to the card endpoint, and in the body, our array of IDs. So much nicer and more performant. Now, the last thing I want to show you today is some new tooling to help you when things go wrong. Now, I've shown you this, really happy query path so far, but we need to introduce a quick error to the schema so that I can show you some of these new debugging features we rolled out in Apollo Sandbox. I'm going to add a field here that doesn't exist. Then let's save and run this query. Now, when I run the query with my test field introduced, it's returning null. And there's lots of reasons that a field could return null. To know that this is an error, that something you've done is causing this null, previously you might have had to go digging around in the response to figure that out. So you may have already noticed that there's a new visual indicator saying, hey, something's wrong here, this is an error. And when you click on this, it's going to take you to where all the requests are, and you can see which one has our mapping error. Now, when you click on that, it takes you to another area that has 3 tabs here for your request, response, and the problem, so you can start to dig into this. If I click on problems, it's going to give you more information about where that problem occurred, which for us is in the selection. And if I click on this, it will launch me right to the correct tab view, and I can see kind of the full picture. Now, this might be enough depending on what's going on. In our case, it's a very simple error we introduced. We know what's up. But a lot of these APIs have really complicated shapes, and these mapping errors can be very difficult to debug. So you might need a little bit more help. And in that case, if you click on this button here, this will open our mapping playground, and it takes the entire response of the API that you're working with here on the left. In the center, you're going to see the mapping that you defined in your schema. And then on the right, you'll see what's returning. So now you can work in this area and get that selection mapping exactly the way you want it. Make sure everything's working. Then you can take this right back to your code. This is making my life so much easier, and I can't wait for you all to use it. So connect on type, dynamic query parameters, batching, and the new debugging experience are some of my favorite features I've been using every day, but there's lots to love in this release, and I'm really excited to hear what you all think.
We've added a lot to connectors. Connect on type, batch support for endpoints that return multiple objects, dynamic query parameters. You saw all that in the demo. We've also added some things we didn't show you, top-level error handling, for example, and made a lot of improvements to the tools and the debugger that come with connectors. All this stuff is available in the new router. We think it's going to help you connect more APIs to the graph the way you want to. So please try it out and keep the feedback coming. One more thing, we've been building a growing library of pre-built connectors for popular APIs, like AWS, OpenAI and Anthropic, Notion, and many other services. You can git clone them just as they are for your project. You can also use them as examples and templates when you're building your own connectors. And if you're building a connector and we don't already have one for it, we'd love your contributions. Some of what's in the library has already come from the community, and we'd love to have more. Just open a PR. Before we wrap, a couple more things to help you get started fast. The first one, and this one's small, but I think it's cool, is a runtime container that bundles together Apollo router with the new Apollo MCP server into a single Docker image that you can deploy into any standard environment. It comes pre-configured with observability hooks and cloud-native integrations that you're going to want. and it makes it easy to keep up to date with new versions of Apollo as we release them. And second, everything we've talked about today is about building better software faster. That's what makes GraphQL so important and so relevant. And especially with MCP and AI and really everything that's happening, more and more developers are coming to Apollo. And not all of them are on big teams and big enterprises with big graphs. We want to make it easy for them to get started too. And so the last thing we're announcing today are 2 new plans designed for smaller teams. The new plans are usage-based. You just pay for the API calls you make and the features that you need. You don't have to decide anything up front. You can start small, scale when you're ready, and grow as large as you need to. The first plan is our developer plan. This is for anyone that wants to kick the tires, experiment with Apollo, put a first workload into production. It's $5 per million queries. Just swipe a credit card and off you go. The second plan is our standard plan. This one's for larger teams. It comes with single sign-on and some other tools that are important for team collaboration and for running production workloads that are more business critical. This one is an annual prepay plan that starts at $8 per million queries. Both are available today. You can read more about them on our website, sign up in minutes, and get started building. That's what we have for you today. Thanks for joining us. I hope we'll see you this fall in San Francisco at GraphQL Summit, and enjoy the rest of your day.